Elena Vasquez had been standing in that boardroom for exactly 4 minutes when her brother-in-law told her to pack her things and leave. She had counted 4 minutes since she walked through the glass doors of Callaway Meridian Group, the commercial real estate firm her late father had built over 30 years, brick by brick, deal by deal, sacrifice by sacrifice. 4 minutes since she sat down at the long mahogany table, placed her hands flat on the cool surface, and looked across at the man her sister had married 6 years ago. "Your position has been eliminated," said Owen Callaway. He said it the way he said most things, smoothly, with his jacket buttoned, and his expression calibrated to project authority without cruelty. As though this were just business, as though she were just a line item. Restructuring, receive a standard severance package. HR has already drafted the paperwork. Elena looked at him for a moment. The room was full. 8 people, not counting Owen, the CFO, 3 senior partners, the head of legal, 2 external consultants she didn't recognize, and her sister's best friend Brooke, who was now inexplicably listed as VP of Operations after Owen had quietly promoted her 3 months ago. Brooke was looking at the table. "On what basis?" Elena asked. Owen slid a folder across to her. "Performance concerns, documented over the past 2 quarters. Missed deadlines on the Harrington portfolio. Client complaints, a pattern of resistance to the new leadership direction." Elena didn't open the folder. She had already read every document inside it. She had found drafts on Owen's personal hard drive 5 months ago, when she'd borrowed his laptop to print something and he'd forgotten to log out. The complaints were fabricated. The deadlines weren't missed. They had been shifted by Owen himself, then retroactively noted as her failures. The pattern of resistance was simply her asking questions in meetings that he didn't want asked. She had understood sitting there in his home office in the middle of the night while he slept upstairs, and her sister slept beside him. Exactly what kind of man she had been working for. "These concerns were never raised with me directly," she said. "They were addressed in your performance reviews," Owen replied. "I never received a written performance review from you. Not once in 3 years, Elena." He said her name the way you say it to someone who is embarrassing themselves. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. You have until 5 o'clock to clear your desk. Security will manage your system access." He paused. "Your father left this company to both of us. I think he'd want us to handle this professionally." He said that last part knowing exactly what it would do to her. She held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she picked up the folder, tucked it under her arm and stood. "I hope you've thought this through carefully, Owen," she said. "I really do." Something moved across his face, brief, involuntary, then it was gone. She walked out. In the elevator, pressing the button for the parking garage, Elena stared at the doors and breathed slowly through her nose. Her hands were steady. She had practiced being steady for 5 months. She had gotten very good at it. Her phone buzzed. A text from her closest colleague, a senior associate named Patrick, who had worked at CMG for 12 years and was one of the few people she trusted completely. "This is wrong. Everyone knows it. You built half this firm." She typed back, "Don't do anything. Wait for me." She did not text her sister. That would come later. Everything would come later. Her father, Douglas Vasquez, had founded Callaway Meridian Group in 1991, with a single leased office in Vancouver and a contact list held together with rubber bands. He was the son of Portuguese immigrants who had come to Canada with almost nothing, and he had built something from nothing in the way that people only do when they have no safety net, and nothing to prove it by except the work itself. By the time he died of a heart attack 3 years ago, CMG had 8 offices across Western Canada, and a portfolio worth north of $400 million. Elena had worked there since she was 26. She had started in property acquisitions, moved into development, and eventually became Director of Strategic Growth, a role that was essentially her father's right hand, redefined for a new generation. She had brought in 3 of the company's biggest clients. She had managed the Vancouver waterfront development that doubled the firm's profile in BC. Owen had come into the picture through her sister, Cara, who was charming and sharp, and had run a mid-sized development firm in Calgary that her father had called solid, if unspectacular. When Cara married him, Douglas had welcomed him into the business, not into leadership, but into a senior advisory role, a seat at the table. A courtesy extended to family. Then Douglas died. The will had been read 6 weeks after the funeral, and Elena, still hollowed out with grief, had paid attention to the broad strokes without absorbing all the details. The company had been left jointly to her and Cara. She understood that. Owen, as Cara's husband, had been given a seat on the board and a minority stake. It had seemed reasonable at the time. It had seemed like something her father would do. Generous, fair, trusting. She had trusted it too much. She had trusted all of it too much. When she found those files on Owen's laptop, she had not slept for 2 days. Not because of the fabricated performance reviews, though those were bad enough. It was the financial records that had made her sit very still, for a very long time. Owen had been diverting money. Not clumsily, whoever had helped him set it up knew what they were doing. But Elena had grown up watching her father build this firm. She had sat across from him for years learning how the money moved, and she could see the pattern in the numbers the way you can see a face in a window when you know where to look. Consulting invoices paid to companies she couldn't find registered anywhere. Service contracts without deliverables. Small amounts, routed carefully, adding up over 18 months to something close to $800,000. The morning after she found it, she called a woman named Frances Chen. Frances was a partner at a white shoe firm downtown, and had been her father's personal attorney for 20 years. She was one of those people who seemed to have been born wearing reading glasses and knowing exactly what she was looking at. She had handled the estate. She had read Douglas Vasquez every document he ever signed. Elena had arrived at Frances's office at 8 in the morning without an appointment. Frances's assistant had taken one look at her face and shown her straight in. "Tell me about the trust," Elena said, sitting down. Frances looked at her steadily. "If you've found something, tell me about the trust first." Frances had set down her pen. "Your father came to me about 8 months before he died," she began. "He told me he was restructuring the estate plan. He loved Owen. He liked him well enough, anyway. But he didn't fully trust what would happen to the company if something happened to him, and Owen ended up with significant authority. He'd seen something in Owen that made him careful. Elena's father had left Kara a meaningful share of the company, which was natural and right. But what Elena had not understood from the reading of the will, what she had not been in any condition to absorb in those first weeks of grief, was that her own shares were structured differently. Douglas had placed Elena's portion in a trust. On paper, the split appeared relatively balanced. In reality, Elena's trust held the controlling interest, 55% of Callaway Meridian Group. The trust had conditions. It would activate fully, giving Elena the authority to act as majority owner, if she was formally removed from her position at the company, or if she discovered evidence of financial misconduct. She had now hit both conditions with the same hammer. "What do I need to do?" she had asked. "Document everything," Frances said. "All of it. Then wait. When he moves against you, the trust activates, and then you have the power to act." So Elena had documented everything. She had spent 5 months collecting evidence with the precision her father had taught her, carefully, completely, leaving nothing to interpretation. She had hired a forensic accountant named Gordon Way, a quiet man with an extraordinary ability to follow money through structures designed not to be followed. Gordon had traced every dollar. He had found more than Elena had found on her own. She had also talked to people inside the company, quietly. 3 junior staff members had come to her separately with their own concerns about Owen. Inappropriate comments in meetings, decisions that overrode their work without explanation. The feeling that the culture of the firm was becoming something that made them not want to come in the morning. She had listened. She had documented those conversations too. The only person who had known what she was building was her friend Heather, who lived 2 blocks from Elena's apartment in Kitsilano, and had talked her through more dark evenings than Elena could count. Heather had held her hand through all of it. The discovery, the months of pretending nothing was wrong, the moments when the weight of carrying the secret felt impossible. "He's going to regret this," Heather had told her, the night before Owen fired her. "It actually lands on him, what he's done, and who he did it to. I want to be there. You can watch it on the news," Elena had said, and for the first time in months she had actually laughed. Now she sat in her car in the parking garage under CMG's downtown office, listening to the ventilation hum. She pulled out her phone and called Frances. "It happened," she said. "This afternoon. He formally terminated my position in front of the full board." "Good," Frances said. There was something in her voice that was not unkind but was entirely certain. "The trust activates as of today. I'll file with the board tonight. We'll schedule an emergency shareholder meeting for tomorrow morning at 9, and Gordon, his report goes to the RCMP's Financial Crimes Unit tonight as well. They've been briefed and they're ready to move." Elena exhaled. 5 months. All of it for this. "Let's do it," she said. That evening she drove to Heather's house instead of her own apartment. She couldn't be home. She couldn't sit in the quiet of her own space and feel all the things she had been not feeling for 5 months. Not yet. Heather opened the door and pulled her into a hug that lasted a long time. They ordered Thai food and sat on the living room floor, and Elena told her everything about the day. Owen's tone? The folder slid across the table like a verdict. Brooke refusing to meet her eyes, walking out of the elevator into the parking garage with her coat still on, and nowhere to be. He texted me, Elena said, holding up her phone. An hour ago. Take care of yourself. No hard feelings. This is just where the business needed to go. Heather read it and made a sound that was not quite a word. Don't answer, she said. I know. Let him think you're sitting somewhere crying. I know. Elena put the phone face down and tried to eat, and mostly couldn't. There was too much nervous energy in her body, sitting wrong in her chest, and she kept going over everything. Had she missed anything? Had Francis covered every angle? Would the board move the way she expected? She went over it all until Heather put a hand on her shoulder and said, Stop, you've done the work. Tomorrow is just the reveal. Elena nodded. She believed it. She just had to get through the night first. She dressed carefully the next morning, a dark charcoal suit she'd had for years. It had been a gift from her father, actually brought back from a trip to Montreal when she'd just been promoted to director. She put her hair up, she took her time. She arrived at the CMG offices at 8:45. The security guard at the front desk looked up with visible confusion. Miss Vasquez, your access card was deactivated. Check your system, she said. You should have received updated clearance this morning. He looked at his screen, looked up again. The expression on his face shifted into something that, in other circumstances, might have been funny. Of course. Go right up. The 10th floor was already moving when Elena stepped off the elevator. She could feel it, the particular energy of a building that knows something is happening before it knows what. People who were walking slightly too fast, conversations that stopped a beat too soon. Francis had arranged the emergency board meeting for 9 a.m. and had personally notified all 7 board members the night before. Owen had not been among the people notified. Elena walked through the open office and into the main boardroom without looking at anyone directly. Francis was already there. So were 5 of the 7 board members. 2 had called in on video. Everyone looked up when she entered. She took her seat at the head of the table. At 9:01, Owen walked in. He was mid-sentence on a phone call, laughing at something, and he was not paying attention, and so he had already pushed through the boardroom door before he saw her. He saw the board members first. Then his eyes found Elena, sitting at the head of the table in the seat he had taken from her 20 hours ago. He stopped, the call was still going. He ended it without saying goodbye. What is this? He said. He was looking at Francis now, not at Elena. Didn't call a board meeting. No, Elena said. I did. You don't have the authority. She does, Francis said. She was already standing. She slid a document across the table toward Owen. I need to advise you, Mr. Calloway, that the ownership structure of Calloway Meridian Group is not what you believe it to be. He went still. Francis explained it clearly and without theater. Douglas Vasquez's trust, its conditions, the activation that had occurred the previous afternoon when Owen formally terminated Elena's employment. The 55% controlling interest that had been held in trust for Elena since her father's death. The fact that Owen's stake in the company, real but minority, had never given him the authority he had assumed it gave him. This isn't trouble, Owen said. His voice had lost its careful calibration. Douglas left us. Douglas left you a role, Francis said. He left the company to his daughter. Please read page 3. Owen opened the document with hands that were not quite steady. Elena watched him read. She watched the moment he understood. It moved across his face the way weather moves across the mountains, fast, then dark, then very still. You knew, he said. He was looking at Elena now. When you walked out of that room yesterday, you already knew. I've known for 5 months, she said. Since I found your consulting invoices. The room was very quiet. The board members were all watching Owen. I'm calling for an immediate vote, Elena said, to remove Owen Calloway as CEO and Managing Director of Calloway Meridian Group, effective immediately. All in favor? Every hand went up. Francis said the formal words. Owen sat very still for a moment, then pushed back his chair. Brooke is also on administrative leave pending an HR investigation, Elena added before he could stand. If you have concerns about that process, direct them to our head of HR. He didn't answer. He walked out. Through the glass walls, Elena watched him move through the office. The floor had gone silent. People were watching from their desks, not pretending not to. Owen had run this place for 3 years on the currency of making people feel uncertain. Now he walked through the silence he had created and it followed him to the elevator. Patrick appeared in the boardroom doorway and looked at Elena. He didn't say anything. She nodded once. He exhaled. What happens now? Asked one of the board members. An older man named Reginald, who had known her father for decades. Now we fix it, Elena said. She looked around the table. My father ran this company on the principle that your word is your asset. We don't cut corners, we don't hide from clients, we stand behind our work. Owen spent 3 years walking away from that. We're walking back. Reginald nodded slowly. You have the board's full support. We should have seen what was happening. I'm sorry we didn't. Elena accepted this without ceremony. There would be time for that later. Right now there was too much to do. The RCMP's Financial Crimes Unit contacted her that afternoon. The forensic accounting report Gordon had prepared was, in the investigators' words, exceptionally thorough. They had enough to move forward. Owen's lawyer was contacted. The process, once started, moved with the impersonal momentum of institutions, slowly at first, then all at once. The divorce proceedings her sister filed were harder to watch. Kara had called Elena the same evening Owen was removed. Elena had answered on the first ring, bracing herself, not knowing what version of this cult it would be: anger, denial, grief. It turned out to be all three, layered and shifting, the way only a conversation between sisters can be. I didn't know about the money, Kara said, after a long time. I want you to know that. I didn't know. I know you didn't, Elena said. Did you know about? Kara stopped, started again. Was there anyone else? There had been. Elena had not been the one to find it, but Gordon's financial trail had turned up hotel receipts that went somewhere they shouldn't, and the private investigator Elena had briefly retained had put a face and a name to it. She had been deciding for weeks whether to tell Kara, and now the decision was being made for her by the question. Yes, Elena said. I'm sorry. Silence on the other end was long enough that Elena checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Okay, Kara said finally. Her voice was flat in a way that sounded like the beginning of something, not the end. I'm so sorry, Elena said again. Don't be sorry for me, Kara said. Be glad for both of us that Dad built things the way he did. The legal proceedings moved through the winter. Owen's lawyer tried several approaches. None of them worked particularly well. Gordon's report was thorough, and Francis was ferocious, and the combination was, as Francis had predicted, extremely difficult to argue against in front of a judge. By spring, Owen had entered into a plea agreement with the Crown. He would repay the diverted funds in full with interest, face a fine, and serve a conditional sentence, with significant restrictions on his professional activity. He would never hold a position of financial authority in a company again. His professional certifications were under review. His reputation in the Vancouver real estate industry, Francis noted with neutral satisfaction, was essentially finished. Brooke, facing her own set of concerns, she had signed off on several of the questionable invoices, had quietly resigned and retained her own counsel. Elena did not feel triumphant. She had expected to, and she did not. What she felt was tired, and then relieved, and then, slowly, in the weeks that followed, something like herself again. The company took more time. She promoted Patrick to head of operations. She brought in an outside audit firm to go through every transaction from the past 3 years. She held a company-wide meeting and told the staff, directly, what had happened. Not everything, but enough. She apologized for the environment Owen had created and for how long it had gone on without being addressed. Several people cried. A few left anyway, which was fair. Most stayed. Why did you stay? She asked one of her junior associates, a woman named Abby who had been with CMG for 2 years and had been on the receiving end of some of Owen's worst moments. Because I believed in what this place used to be, Abby said, and I wanted to see if it could be that again. Elena told her it could. She meant it. The work of rebuilding was less dramatic than the work of surviving. It required showing up every morning and making decisions that were not easy, and sometimes being wrong and saying so, and giving people the space to say that things weren't working before they became crises. It required being, in other words, the kind of leader her father had been. Not perfect, but honest, and consistent, and genuinely interested in the people around him. She started to enjoy it. There was also Kara to think about. Her sister had moved into a new apartment in North Vancouver that spring, a bright place with a balcony that caught the afternoon light. She was dating someone new quietly, a man she'd met through a mutual friend, someone Elena liked when she met him, a calm and steady person who made Kara laugh in a way she hadn't laughed in years. You seem better, Elena told her, over dinner one evening. I feel better, Kara said. I feel like I can breathe again. I didn't realize how much I couldn't. She looked at Elena. Thank you for protecting the company. I know it cost you. I know it cost you to not tell me sooner. I didn't know how, Elena said honestly. I know, I want you to know I understand it, and I'm not angry. Elena reached across the table and squeezed her sister's hand. Heather threw a party the following summer, ostensibly to celebrate her own promotion but transparently an excuse to gather everyone together, and eat too much and stay up too late. Elena sat in Heather's backyard in Kitsilano with people she'd known for years, and someone put music on, and it was warm enough to stay outside until almost midnight, and she thought, sitting there holding a glass of very good wine, that she felt happy. Quietly, solidly happy. Not the relief of a crisis ended, but actual happiness. The kind that doesn't need anything in particular to justify it. She had also met someone. His name was James Okafor. She had met him at a fundraising event for the Vancouver Community Foundation. He ran a non-profit focused on housing access, and he was one of the sharpest, most clear-eyed people she had ever had a 15-minute conversation with, and she had thought about him for the rest of the evening and then told Heather about him on the drive home. "Call him," Heather said. "I don't have his number." "Find it. You run a real estate firm." She found it through the foundation's website, which felt marginally less aggressive. She sent a professional email saying she was interested in discussing a potential partnership between CMG and his organization. He replied within the hour. They met for coffee. The professional conversation lasted about 20 minutes, before becoming something else entirely. He was thoughtful and funny and entirely unconcerned with impressing her, which she found immediately disarming. He asked harder questions like he actually wanted to hear the answers. He didn't perform anything. Their first actual date was dinner at a small restaurant in Gastown. They talked for 3 hours. He walked her to her car in the rain because neither of them had thought to bring an umbrella, and at the end of the block he said, "I'd really like to see you again," and she said, "Same time next week?" And he smiled and said yes. She told Francis about him a month later, because Francis had become, over the course of everything, something close to a friend. Francis listened and looked at Elena in the way that people look at you when they're very pleased but don't intend to make a fuss about it. "Your father would like him," Francis said. "I think so too," Elena said. The victim impact hearing took place on a gray afternoon in October. Elena had been asked if she wanted to give a statement. She had said yes immediately, because she knew that if she didn't, she would always wish she had. She sat in the formal wooden chair and looked at the legal pad on which she had written her statement, then set it aside. She had memorized most of it. She needed to look at Owen when she said certain things, and she could not do that from behind paper. "My father built Kahlua Meridian Group over 30 years, she began. "He built it on the principle that your reputation is the only thing you can't rebuild once it's gone." Owen knew that. He worked alongside Douglas for 6 years. He attended his funeral. He stood in the church and said all the right things. And then he spent the next 3 years stealing from the company my father left behind. Owen was looking at his hands. "The financial theft was significant," she continued. "But what I want the court to understand is that the damage is not only financial." Owen spent 3 years building a workplace where people felt afraid. Where raising concerns led to consequences. Where good people my father had hired, people he had trusted, started to wonder if they should leave. 2 of them did. I know both of them. They were exceptional. We have not recovered what we lost when they walked out the door. She looked at him directly then. He did not look up. "I spent 5 months preparing for what eventually happened. I spent 5 months careful and strategic and patient, because I understood that moving too soon would give him time to cover his tracks. What I want Owen to understand is what those 5 months cost. Coming into work every day. Sitting across from him in meetings. Going home and knowing that the person who had taken something that wasn't his, was sitting in my father's chair, and that I could not yet do anything about it without jeopardizing everything. People ask me how I managed it. The honest answer is that I thought about my father constantly. Thought about what he built and why he built it, and what it would mean to let it be dismantled. That kept me steady when nothing else could." She folded her hands in her lap. "I'm not asking the court for severity beyond what justice requires. I'm asking for accountability. When someone in a position of trust uses that trust to steal. From a family, from employees, from clients. The accounting has to be real. I hope this process makes it real." The room was quiet for a moment. The judge nodded to her. She walked back to her seat. Heather was 2 rows back and didn't say anything. Just pressed her hand briefly on Elena's shoulder as she passed. Owen was allowed to speak before sentencing. He stood and said the things people say when they are sorry they got caught. He used words like regret and reflection and the pressures he had been under, and his voice broke in the right places, and Elena watched him and felt very little. Not cruelty, not satisfaction, just a clear-eyed recognition of who he was and who he had always been, and a quiet acknowledgement that her father had seen it long before she had. The sentence was substantial. Heather squeezed her hand in the hallway outside the courtroom, and Francis said, "Your father made sure you had what you needed. And Elena nodded and didn't say anything for a while. That evening she sat alone in her apartment with the lights low and called James. "How are you?" he asked. "Finished," she said. "Think I'm just finished. I'll come over." "You don't have to. I know, I'll be there in 20 minutes. He brought dinner from the Thai place on her block, and they sat on the couch, and she told him about the day, all of it, and he listened the way he always listened, fully, without trying to solve anything. When she was done he said, "You carried that for a long time." "I did. You don't have to anymore." She leaned against him and felt, for the first time in a very long time, that she was not holding anything up, that things could just be still. She slept well for the first time in months. 2 years later, Callaway Meridian Group opened its 9th office in Calgary, Owen's former city, which no one mentioned out loud but everyone noted privately. The opening event was held on a Friday evening, and Elena flew in with James and stood in the atrium of the new space, looking at the photographs that lined the entrance wall. Her father at the founding, the first office, the early team, young and slightly blurry in the way of 1990s photographs. Her father and Elena at the waterfront development launch, 5 years ago now, him with his arm around her shoulders and both of them squinting into the sun. Someone at the event, a journalist from a Calgary business publication, asked her how she thought about the last few years, the scandal, the rebuilding, what she had learned from all of it. Elena thought about it honestly before answering. "My father used to say that real estate is about knowing the value of what you're looking at," she said. "Some people look at a property and see what's on the surface. The best people look at the foundation." He was always looking at foundations. She paused. "Think about that a lot. The foundation he built for this company, and the foundation he made sure I'd have to stand on if things went wrong. He was a good man. I'm still trying to live up to that." The journalist wrote it down. Elena looked at the photograph of her father again and at the photograph beside it. The CMG team from last year's company retreat, 83 people, everyone laughing at something off camera, and she went to find James, who was standing near the windows talking to Patrick and 2 of the new Calgary hires, and he saw her coming and smiled in the particular way he had, that made everything feel navigable, and she crossed the room to stand next to him, and someone said something that made the whole group laugh, and it was a Friday evening in Calgary, and everything for the moment was genuinely fine. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She looked at it for a moment, then answered. "Elena." Owen's voice, still smooth, still calibrated, as though time had not changed the instrument, only the key. "I heard about the Calgary office. That's a significant milestone." She stepped away from the group, into a quieter corner near the hallway. "How did you get this number?" she asked. "I just wanted to call. To say, I know I don't have any right to reach out, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what I cost everyone, the company. Your sister." "Owen." "I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to say that." She was quiet for a moment. Outside the windows, Calgary's downtown glittered in the October dark, and she could hear James and Patrick laughing about something, and the room was warm and full of people who had worked hard and were celebrating that work. And she thought about her father, who had looked at the foundations of things, and about what the foundation she was standing on was made of now. "I appreciate that you said it," she told Owen finally. "But you're not a part of this anymore. You haven't been for a long time. Don't call again." She ended the call and stood for a moment with her phone in her hand. Then she walked back across the room to where James was waiting, and joined the conversation, and didn't think about Owen Callaway again for a very long time. The company her father had built was thriving. Her sister was happy. Elena was, against all the reasonable predictions of the 2 worst years of her life, also happy, not in spite of what had happened but somehow because of it. Because of what it had required her to become, and what it had clarified about who she already was. Douglas Vasquez had looked at his daughter and seen the person who could carry what he had built. He had structured his trust accordingly. It made sure, in the way of careful and loving people who understand that they won't always be there, that she would have what she needed. She had needed it. She had used it. And now she was here, in a room full of light and people and work she was proud of, and the city stretched out beyond the windows in every direction, and everything that mattered was intact.